The next speaker is Katriel Schory, the director of the Israel Film Fund. Big warm welcome to you, Katriel. Thank you very much for coming. Katriel produced over 200 films with Bell Films, so he knows what he's speaking about. You have called your session the Creative Initiator Producer, constantly hunting for a good story.
Yes.
Great. A warm welcome to you and all the best for the...
How much, like 20 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll talk standing because I'm an old man and if I sit, I sleep. So I better talk while standing. And I'll share with you some of the experiences that I've learned throughout the years. As you heard, I was a producer for many years. I'm now almost 45 years in the film industry. I studied in NYU, in the New York University Film Department in the roaring 60s. I belong to the famous generation of drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And I still remember some of it. And I will try and share with you what I've learned throughout the years. For 5 years, I think of 6 years, when I started, I did almost everything that one can do on a set. I was a line producer, a first AD, directed some films, did almost, but I would say that for 5-6 years, I spent maybe 250, 280 days out of every year, out on location, out on sets. So I could say what we call a set animal. And only after that, I dared open my own production company, and I ran this company for quite a number of years, and we did a hell of a lot. Coming from a small and a crazy country, we had to do almost everything, which means television and studio shows and game shows and drama and feature films and documentaries and production services and all of that in order to survive. We did a hell of a lot, which means that we used in a very elaborate way the film language, the film grammar, and its many different possibilities of use. But we didn't specialize. So I would say that we did not specialize in making commercials or making this or that. On the other hand, we had the privilege of really play with the film language and the film grammar in the different possibilities and the different genres, the different ways that we all know. Altogether, I would say that, cinema is relatively probably the newest art form, which was created after Darwin and Nietzsche and so on, which means after we all understood that God is not clear if he's alive or not. So the old ancient art forms were all very heavily, and the artists heavily under church and under the religion and so on. This is probably the most free art form that we have. It's 120-some years old, and it's relatively quite free. But in a way, it's not that free because you depend on a hell of a lot of financing, which is another trouble. But anyway, I'll get to it in a minute. Altogether, I would say that we live in a situation that is really very interesting one, and in a way, even gives us an opportunity because no matter what we do and what kind of art what kind of use of the film language we have, we still have to tell a story. Whether it's games or this or shorts or drama or feature film, whatever, it's always about having a story, telling a story, and we have to tell it. And this has not changed in thousands of years. And we need to tell stories to each other. And we need all the time, because in many of the stories, there's always part of our own lives. And this will stay no matter what, with all the new technologies and changes and this and that. The basic core is to tell a story. And for us as filmmakers, this is, in my opinion, the core of our activity. For me, I am a constant, after all these years, a constant hunter, a hunter for a story, a hunter for an idea which I hope and believe that my nose will tell me that it can turn into a film or a television series or whatever. And we are constantly on the lookout. And we should be with all our senses out there, because in the way, the real capital that we have as filmmakers is not the equipment or the lens or whatever. It is the idea. It is the story. And there are a lot of stories around us, but we have to develop this sense of being able to trace and identify the idea, which hopefully we hope will turn into a story, because this is what we really have to sell. No one will give you money to make a film because you have a great camera or you have a great editing facility. They will give you money if you have a great idea and a great story. And there are a hell of a lot of sources of stories around us. And if you think about it, and if I look at this region, which I'm not that familiar, but I guess there's a lot of stories where there are people, there are stories. And the thing is really to crystallize and understand, and also understand the trends and the zeitgeist and the mood of the time and so on. Also stories which can be more contemporary, but also some stories which can be canonic type of stories that can stay forever and ever. And I think that we can see stories coming in from different sources. I'll go very, very brief. One of them, of course, are, in this case, regional stories, stories which come from our own backyard. And if you'll see, the most successful feature films of recent years, I'm not talking about the Americans, are people who are stories which came from the backyard of the filmmakers, whether it will be from former Yugoslavia, from the Far East or whatever. Even at the TorinoFilmLab, you'll see some of the most powerful stories which came out are stories which come from our own backyard. But if the stories have a universal theme in it, a basic premise that is universal, even if it comes from our own backyard, it will work and it can sell and sail. So think about stories which come from our own backyard. The other thing, of course, is life experience. I come from a country where we all have tremendous life experience. This is why the Israeli cinema, for example, is very, very low on adaptations. We have very few films which are based on pieces of literature, on books. Most of them are stories which come from our own personal experience. It's a fact. I'm not saying if it's good or bad, but it's a fact. We don't have this tradition like in America or in the UK, mainly in America, which the cinema, I'm talking now only feature films, is heavily based on pieces of literature, books, etc., and so on. So life experience is definitely something that we all share, and also our own personal experiences, and we all have gone through a hell of a lot of it. There's also a whole trend of biopics and autobiopics. I had today 7 meetings or 8 meetings with the projects in the framework here in TorinoFilmLab. When you dig into that, when you talk to these guys today, at least 5 of them, this is their most personal story that they turned into a script. And they all have a certain wound, a certain scratch in their life, and it comes out in the story. And really, maybe 5, 6 of them, at the end, after 10, 15 minutes, they come and say, you know, in fact, it's my own personal story. In fact, it's something which happened to me. Not exactly, but something which happened to me. Which shows you how much it comes, many times it comes for your own personal experience. And then you have this whole thing of books and adapting books and pieces of literature. Here you have to be very careful because there are huge books, small books, books which are very canonic or very much, which don't lend themselves in a very natural way to be translated into movies. And also sometimes you can see that somebody tries to incorporate a whole book into a film and doesn't necessarily work. When in adaptation you have to really crystallize your thinking, what part of the book and what am I going to take and turn into a script. It's not easy. It may sound a little easy, but it's not easy. But I think that we have to think about this huge amount of talent and options and stories that we have in literature. The only thing is to trace and find out what could really work and turn into a movie. And especially it comes, as many of you may know, usually the directors or filmmakers in their first feature film, they will bring everything that they accumulated in their life until making the first film. And then comes the second movie. And the second movie, they start looking for material and start looking for stories. And they don't know what to look for. And this is the time that maybe pieces of literature may come. And there is something about many places in the world, especially in America, and also in Europe, it's the whole issue of development. I think that there are many filmmakers, or there are some filmmakers, some producers who do not believe in development, who do not believe in development. And you know, in Hollywood, there is a big saying which says, development hell. Why development hell? Because you put a lot of money, you buy an option on a book, this, that, and so on, and you don't know if it will ever materialize or it will ever happen. But so this is for us, in a way, our industry R&D. This is like in the high tech. You put money because you risk this money and you hope that it will get you somewhere. And I think that this, if we really want to be genuine filmmakers and we want to understand what is our business, our way of life all about, is really thinking really seriously and going for development. Because otherwise, what are we doing? In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that I think that we all have to devote a certain period, a certain time for that. We have to be very curious people, and you have also to devote a certain amount of money. I can tell you for myself, as a producer for many years, every year I'll put aside a few thousand euros just to buy a couple of options on a couple of books, just to take a couple of kids that will go through all the weekly newspapers and news magazines, not only from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but from the whole regions and the whole countries. Maybe they will find a small piece, an article, something which can turn into a movie. And this is a bit of money, but it's not so bad. It's not so much. And we all know the story about this little article of no more than 100 words in a small regional newspaper in Northern California, which ended up being the movie Irene Brockovich. And it all started with a tiny little article in a small regional newspaper in Northern California. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we have to be super curious persons, and we have to be with all our senses out there. I read every piece of paper that I can get my hands on. When I wait for the dentist or when I went for the barber, I'm all the time reading. Because you never know where you'll find this little idea, boom. It sparks something in me. Maybe there is something that can turn into a movie. And you know, you'll be surprised how much you have in newspapers and magazines and all those things, but not everything. So development, or thinking in terms of development, is not it's about really being out there with your senses all the time. And it's something which we really have to really take care of that. And especially in Europe, because in Europe, unlike the United States, you have those public funds. You have funding for development. In America, you have nothing. But over here, you have money for development. And I think that we should use it as much as we can, because it gives us this opportunity and covers a little bit of the cost of development. And of course, you know, with development, because you never know, and it's a risk, but we are in a risky business altogether. So, of course, this is part of the risk that you take, and maybe 1, 2, 3 years that you put a bit of money aside and nothing really happened, eventually it may happen. So I just wanted you to make this little point so that you will remember. And then, of course, there is another element that we have to think when we decide on selecting a certain story. And this is our responsibility, first of all, as human beings, first of all, as creative people, and thirdly, as filmmakers. You know, we deal with an art form which is a very powerful art form. I'm not that naive, and as you see, I'm quite old, to think that a movie can change the world or whatever, or even the life of a person. But I do believe that sometimes a scene, a sequence, something can change something in people's mind, can do something, can make them aware of something. And this is why we bear and we have to think that we have a tremendous responsibility in the way we deal with this particular tool or art form that we decided to hook our life to. And we have a responsibility because it's powerful, it's influential, it's still the language of our age, and we have responsibility, and we should never forget to oversee our values as human beings, as people, when we deal with it. Of course, you can say that this is an art form, like many art forms, which is heavily based on manipulation. Yes, we manipulate by the mere decision on the way I select the camera position, or by the way I decide on the lens, I already made a point and manipulate. And this is okay, but within limits, not to abuse the power and the strength that are given to us by making films, and always remember our values as human beings. And it goes down to what many people may call professional integrity. And professional integrity is many times left with us. And where do we draw the line as human beings by using this particular art form? And I know that, and I don't want to sound too naive, but it's really, I really believe in it. And especially when it comes to documentaries, which are even more open to manipulation even than movies. Because, you know, people are going out there, they shoot endless hours, you never know if it's right, wrong, or, you know, you have to trust, and you have to all the time be truthful to yourself, and be really truthful to yourself in the way you use this particular art form. But on the other hand, when we talk about the different uses of this art form, I would like to just think about it. What is a movie? When you think about it, it's an art form which is made out of many, many, many other art forms. And our test as filmmakers, as people who are making films, is really in the following. When you think about it, what goes into making a movie? There are very ancient art forms that go into making a movie, which is painting, and music, and literature, and makeup, and wardrobe. These are art forms which goes back thousands of years back. And here we come, and we take all these art forms, and we integrate them, and we create a new art form, which is called a movie. And our biggest test as filmmakers, in my opinion, if we manage to integrate all these art forms and create a new one, which is called a movie. Which means that we also deal, and this is part of the nice part of what we do, with a whole bunch of creative people. And for me, as a producer, one of the biggest challenges is to manage creative people. Believe me, to manage money is nothing. To manage time, it's nothing. But to manage creative people, this is a tremendous challenge. And what goes into it is that you have these people, the heads of the chiefs, that are all artists in their own right. The cinematographer, this, that, everybody. And rightly so. And they have huge egos, and this is okay. And basically what you want is that they should give you the best of what they have. They should give you the best of the talent for the screen, but within a given framework. And this is not easy. So you have to give them all the space in the world so that they will bring out the best of the talent, but within a given framework, which means the means of productions that you have. But to integrate all of these people, to integrate all these art forms in creating a new one is a tremendous challenge for all of us. But I think that once we understand it, it will make our life a little easier. Now, in terms of management, as I said, I don't want to go much into management, we don't have time. But really, when you think about it, it incorporates so many things. Because really, as we say, we manage people, money, talent, and every movie, to a certain extent, is a prototype. It's one of a kind. And a prototype, like a prototype, you put everything that you have into the prototype because you want the prototype to look the best you can. So when you think about it in terms of prototypes, you really put all that you have into it. Having said all of that, we live in a realistic world, and we live in a situation in which wherever I go, we live in a world where there's a lot more talent, there are a lot more stories, and then there is money, or there's time, or time slots, and so on. And we have to understand that we are taking upon ourselves a life, a way of life, which really will heavily based on a situation which is inherent, a selective type situation, which means that we will have to submit, that we will have to wait, and we will have to live with everything that goes with this selective process. I know all the film fund directors in the world. I meet with all of them. I think I know almost all the systems in the world. There are hardly any automatic type systems, a little bit in France and Canada, but basically everywhere it's based on a selective process. And when it's based on a selective process, there are three elements that become part of our life. The one thing is to be able to deal and live with negative answers. And it will come. I submitted to the same fund that I manage many of my projects, and I was rejected many times. I also received few times, but I've been on both sides of the desk I'm sitting, and I know the feeling, and I don't forget. But it's part of life. All my years as a producer, I made a calculation that about 18, maybe 20% of everything that we ever developed got made. 4/5, maybe 4/5 of that we developed and put money died in the drawers or not. But anyway, this is the reality. About 20% will get made. And it's part of life, and we have to learn how to live with rejects and with negative answers. But because I was trained in America, and I was trained in a way that always they kept telling me, the fact that you got a negative answer has nothing to do with you as a human being. Has nothing to do with you as a professional filmmaker. It has to do with the fact that this particular project did not generate interest. And it happens. And we have to live with it, but we should not, it should not really get us down. So it's easy for me to stand here and say like this because we are all human beings and we have emotions and feelings, etc., and it's rightly so. But we have to understand that we have to wake up the next morning, clean ourselves, and keep on going, because otherwise it will not work for us. The second element which comes with it, which is a very sad one, is that at a certain point, after we gave everything to the project, we tried it everywhere. We went to this unbelievable European pitching industry, which is a big travel agency now it turned into, and we gave it everywhere, and it didn't generate any interest. And then comes this very tragic, really difficult moment that you have to shelf a project. You said, I gave it everything. I went from the Baltic events all to the Sofoto, to the meetings on the bridge in Istanbul, everywhere. Nobody, it didn't generate interest. It didn't take off. At a certain point, you have to shelf the project, which is tough. You put blood, sweat, and tears into it. You did everything you could. It didn't take off. You have to shelf it. You shelf it maybe 5 years from now, maybe 8 years from now. The zeitgeist, the trends will be right for the project, and you can pull it out again. It can happen. So shelving a project is the second element that we have to learn to live with. The third element, which is really not an easy one, and Sabine asked me to talk about it, it's really not so much about this as to a certain extent, we are in the business of waiting. Our business is to wait. We wait for answers from funds. We wait for answers from television stations. We wait for answers from commissioning editors. We wait and we wait. In the meantime, life goes by. And this is terrible. And this is tragic. But if you think about it, this is the kind of life that we have taken upon ourselves. You wait for all these answers because making a movie costs money. And how do you balance this endless waiting? And this is really something which has been on my mind for many years because I know it from my personal experience. And how do you deal with this endless waiting? So one of the ways, so you can, if you're a director, your life is a little more difficult. If you're a producer, you can balance your act away. You can do different things. I did game shows and talk shows and all kind of nonsense stuff and stupid stuff, only because I had to survive and feed my kids, but also because, you know, to gap this waiting. So what we've seen now in some of cases in Europe, and what we introduced also in the fund that I manage, is that we introduced this very super low budget track, which was called the guerrilla type filmmaking, which is a very low budget. Everybody knows in Israel the guerrilla track, which means that the budget of the films cannot exceed 200,000 euros, and we invest at least 120,000 euros. And you would think that this is, and the reason I decided to go for it is not in order to give a chance to young kids who think, how do I go from the graduation film to my first feature film, but to do it for the veteran and the ongoing directors. So that in between, while they're waiting for the big money, they're waiting to make the film, a big movie or whatever, they can write something small. They can write a small story that can be done within this given framework. And they start writing and developing, knowing that this is the budget that they will have, that this is the money that they will have to make the film. And you'll be surprised how, and every year, I introduced it like 7 years ago, more or less, and every year I greenlight about 4 to 6 super low budget films. And you know, my biggest surprises come from this particular section because some of the films have made it really big on a super low budget, won prizes, Tribeca, Sundance, Cannes, you name it, because of this super low budget. But what is really important, that the people keep on working, and the technologies of nowadays allow you to do it. In the old days, we couldn't do it. But with all this digital world and this editing stuff and so on, you can do if you write the right story for this particular platform. And it's doable. But I'm very careful when I look at the project, we select, I want to make sure that they will be able to deliver in such a tiny budget. And I think that this is something that you should think for. And I would say that out of every film, every time that we greenlight every year, at least 3 or 4 movies are going to veteran filmmakers. People who are in the 50s, 60s, 70s, who are in between. Because a working director in Israel, in Europe, let's say he's a working director, he will do at best every 3 or 4 years a movie. This is it. And it's already good. And what in between? And what is he doing in between? So it's about training, about keep on doing. It's about hope. It's about creating hope and about just keep on doing. And it's doable. But you have to come with a brilliant and a great idea. If you have a great idea, that can go into it. And I can give you a pitch of one of the stories that I greenlighted on the super low budget, because it's a pitch which is 35 seconds, so the American way, you know, what they call high concept, that you can tell the story in less than 1 minute. And so this director came to me and said, listen, I have a story. I want to tell you my story because you have to give me money. So I said, okay. So he stands and he says, listen, a young man and a young woman meet in a pub. They never met before. They're in the late 20s, more or less. They sit on the pub. They don't know each other. They get to know each other, you know, tick-tock, 3, 4 minutes, a little bit of a flirting. And then the girl, as some of the Israeli girls are, she says, listen, let's cut the bullshit. My place or your place? Before he answers, she tells him, let's go to my place. So they go into his car to go to her place, and for 75 minutes, they cannot find parking. So I told him, take the 100,000 euros, go and make your movie. Because, and this was it. This was the pitch, I swear to God. So, what do we have? We have basically a young man and a young woman who just met. They are both in the car. They get to know each other. She's a little more abrasive. He's a little more shy. They get to know each other. We as audience, we get to know them. It's a witty dialogue, very snappy, not big cinematography, all in a car. They rigged this one car. They shot the film in 7 nights or 8 nights in Tel Aviv, and this was it. And now there's a remake made in America. There's a couple of guys who took the rights to put it as a stage on Belgium and other countries, and this boy who came to me with not even a single euro in his pocket doesn't know what to do now with the money. So, so basically the reason I'm telling you this story is because there are possibilities nowadays. There are possibilities. And we have to really think it over and really think about an idea, a concept, something that can be done in this low budget. It has to be carefully structured. You have to be very careful the way you set up the production. It's, I have to finish, yes? And it's not, and you cannot, but it's doable. And honestly, I believe it's about hope. And I'm very happy. The same as I'm happy that we decided, just 2 moments. As the same as I'm very happy, I think that I'm one of the Israel Film Fund is probably one of the only ones in the world that has a particular submission date for comedies only. And we have a submission date for films for children. And we have a submission date for genre cinema. And I took taxpayers' money and invested in 4 zombie movies. And you'll think, I don't know if there's any other of my colleagues in Europe who will dare taking public money or taxpayers' money and put into a zombie movies. But I believe that even a zombie movie, if it's done well, there's nothing wrong with it, and there's a huge audience for it. So basically what I'm trying to tell you, to think out of the box and say, not only this heavy drama, you go to Cannes Festival, after 10 days you come out, you want to kill yourself, what kind of a world it is. And the world around us is not that bleak and all that dark the way that you see in 10 days in Cannes, which is a total frustration, disaster, and you know, you come completely depressed. So I think that, you know, comedies is right, and horror is right, and sci-fi is right, and, you know, and zombies is definitely right, and thrillers is right, and why not? So basically, we live, no, I'm serious now, we live in an era, in a period where you have to think in niche audience, niche thinking. And you know, there's an audience for all of that, the same as there's an audience for an art house. And I'll just finish by saying the old story, and all of you are filmmakers, and I think that we are privileged people, because like the story about this very old man who had only €1 left in his pocket. With half of the euro, he bought food, and with the other half, he bought a flower. And we are the one who provide the flower. Thank you very much.